Now let's discuss the meshing in FLOEFD. So it's the same underlying technology as in Flowtherm XT. However, you do have more options for refinement, and it is set up a little bit differently than you do it in Flowtherm XT. First, we'll look over global mesh, and then secondly, we'll look at how you would refine something in the more local level. So for global mesh, you want to right-click and do Edit Definition to open up the global mesh settings. By default, it will be set to automatic with a level 3 resolution. And we can check the Show Basic Mesh so we can see what that looks like. As we move the slider here, you can see the resolution change. We also have the option for minimum gap size. So this is calculated automatically based on the size of the model, the computational domain size, also any features you have set here where you chose any faces. It will look at those gap sizes as well and determine a size, but it's possible that's going to be insufficient to recognize some relatively small gaps, so you can check that here and input your value. Now let's look at the right view here. So as we move this slider, we can see the different levels of resolution. Now with FLOEFD's Smart Cell technology, within one grid cell, you can have up to 20 different control volumes. So you can have multiple fluids, multiple solids, all recognized by FLOEFD's Smart Cell technologies. And on the surfaces between the solid and the fluid, there are polyhedral cells that will be created. So let's just solve this and I can show you visually what that would look like with these settings. So if we check this off, we go to Run, we uncheck the solver, just have the mesh checked. We'll use all cores, which by the way, FLOEFD's mesher scales nicely up to 32 cores. We'll hit Run. We'll have a new window open up where it first prepares the geometry and then solves for the mesh. So just a couple seconds, it created 32,000 cells. Under Results, we'll create a surface plot. And we'll use, and by the way, we'll go over post-processing later on in a future video. So for now, I'll go quickly just to show you the mesh. I'll use all faces. We'll do mesh solid color or fixed color. Under options, we want to make sure that use CAD geometry is off. So we're only seeing, or we're only visualizing the geometry that FLOEFD sees after it meshes it, rather than the CAD geometry from Creo. We'll hit OK. We'll also check off the geometry here. So this is how FLOEFD meshed it with the settings we had prior in the global mesh settings. Okay, so if we look at this, we can see how there's a polyhedral cell here representing that curvature. For everything else that is rectangular, it has the exact measurements of the original CAD geometry. All right, let's turn off the surface plot. We'll bring back the geometry by clicking on the display model geometry. Now let's say you want more options. The reason you might want to go into manual is if you have a very complicated model and you want more refinement options that you want to do manually, or let's say you want something more consistent where you want to keep the same settings going from model to model rather than have FLOEFD do its own thing. You can go to Manual. First, you'll be presented with the basic mesh size. If you click here, you can just say I want 47 cells across in X direction, or you can just specify a size here. For a lot of electronics, you can kind of start off with 10 by 10 by 10 millimeters. It's pretty decent sizing. Depending on the size of your model and the refinement level you want to do, you can adjust accordingly. And then let's look at the options you have available here. So I'll uncheck them first. First one, refining level. So here we can refine all the fluid cells from level 0 to 9, all the solid cells, and the cells at the fluid solid boundary only, right? So for example, I had a model where I was simulating a fan and the fan blades, and so I wanted the tips of the fans to have a lot more refinement, so I used this feature. Now, to understand the level of refinements here, we have a great feature called Display Refinement Level. So let's check that on. And let's look at the right view here. So the way that works is it takes one cell and splits it into 8 cells. Your basic mesh size is your level 0 refinement level. Okay, so in this case, that would be level 0 would be 10 by 10 by 10 millimeters. Level 1 would split that one cell into 8 cells. So each one of those would be 5 by 5 by 5 millimeters. All right, and now if we zoom in here, looking at this curvature, if we do level 2, it'll be split up into 8 more cells. Level 3, level 4, and so on. So this is a great way to display what the refinement levels are, right? So for example, let's say we want level 3 refinement. What we can then do is specify, for example, I want the solids in the whole model under global mesh to be a level 3 refinement. And we'll take a look at this again in when I do a localized mesh refinement. Channels allows you to refine channels between objects. And then we also have advanced refinements here. For example, we can do small solid feature refinements, curvature refinements, and so on. Okay, so I'll uncheck these. We don't necessarily need them for this model. I'll just keep it at a basic mesh and hit OK. Now, if we want to do a local mesh refinement, let's say we want to refine these gap pads. Let's pretend they're dies and we want refinement there, right? So you can right click on mesh, do insert local mesh, and then you have the option to pick objects, or you can just specify a location and just drag the arrows, and then you can select the mesh refinement options here. For this, we'll do the part selection. One quick tip is if you already have those objects selected in one of the features here under input data, so for example, I already know that I have the gap pad selected in this solid material. If I click this, in my selection here, it will populate everything that was associated with that solid material. Okay, so for here, I want to refine them maybe level 3. And if I'm not sure again, let's display the refinement level. Let's look at the right view and zoom in. And so level 3 would look like that. It would give me about 4 cells into the thickness of this object here. Okay, so I like that. I'm going to leave this at level 3. Hit OK. Let's go ahead and run this again and see what it looks like. All right, so now we have 114,000 cells. Close this window. Let's display this again, and let's also turn off the geometry. So yeah, you can see how much more refined these gap pads now are. So that's how you'd create a local mesh. All right, we don't need that refinement, so I can just right click and hit suppress. And the next time I run this, it will have the global mesh settings only.